Imagine a government lab where scientists didn't just build weapons. They tried to bend time itself. Not metaphorically. Not theoretically. But literally. According to dozens of witnesses, runaway insiders, and at least one security guard who swore he saw something crawl out of thin air, the US government may have experimented with mind control, portals, and time travel, all inside a decaying Air Force base on the eastern tip of Long Island. This was called the Montauk Project. And if even half of these claims are true, this isn't science fiction. This is America's strangest Cold War secret. Before we talk about time portals, psychic experiments, or government cover-ups, we need to talk about the place where all of this supposedly happened. Because Montauk isn't a myth. It's real. You can visit it. You can stand there right now. On the eastern tip of Long Island, where the Atlantic Ocean crashes against jagged cliffs, sits an old military installation known as Camp Hero. At first glance, it looks harmless. A state park. Hiking trails. Ocean views. But then you notice something off. Concrete bunkers half buried in the ground. Rusting blast doors. And towering above it all, an enormous radar structure locals still call Building 610. Low mechanical hum begins. This base was constructed during World War II, later upgraded during the early Cold War, when the United States was terrified of a Soviet surprise attack. And that fear shaped everything. Officially, Montauk Air Force Station served one purpose. Early warning radar, watching the skies for incoming bombers. Simple. Logical. Defensive. But here's where things start getting strange. By the late 1960s, the military announced the base was being shut down. Operations terminated. Personnel reassigned. On paper, Montauk was dead. But locals say it never really closed. Lights still flickered inside the radar tower at night. Generators hummed long after power was cut. And military vehicles were seen entering restricted areas well into the early 1970s. One longtime Montauk resident later recalled. They said it was abandoned. But abandoned places don't have guards. Brief pause, music tightens. Guards. Fences. And areas no one was allowed near. Especially Building 610. And that raises a very uncomfortable question. If nothing was happening here, why was it still being protected? To understand why Montauk even could exist, we need to remember how strange the Cold War actually was. This wasn't just a battle of tanks and missiles. It was a battle of ideas, fear, and desperation. In the 1950s through the 1970s, the US government believed one thing above all else. If the Soviets were experimenting with something, anything, America could not afford to fall behind. Even if that something sounded insane. Brief pause. This was the era of Project MKUltra, a now declassified CIA program that tested mind control techniques on unwitting subjects. People were dosed with LSD. Locked in sensory deprivation chambers. Interrogated under hypnosis. And here's the uncomfortable part. None of that was a conspiracy theory. It's documented history. So when former insiders later claimed Montauk was part of a next phase, a darker, deeper continuation of MKUltra, it didn't exactly break the pattern. According to those claims, Montauk wasn't just studying the mind. It was trying to amplify it. One alleged Defense Department briefing from 1971, never officially acknowledged but widely cited in underground research circles, described Montauk as a behavioral and temporal research initiative operating under black budget authority. Let's stop on that word again. Temporal. Not psychological. Not neurological. Temporal. As in, time. Low ominous tone rises. Several former technicians claimed the radar tower at Montauk wasn't just scanning the sky, it was being used as a massive electromagnetic amplifier. The idea? If you could flood the human brain with the right frequencies, you might unlock abilities that normally stay dormant. Memory manipulation. Remote influence. And, according to the most extreme claims, interaction with time itself. Now, does that sound impossible? Absolutely. But it also sounds exactly like the kind of thing Cold War scientists would attempt when no one was watching. And Montauk was perfect. Remote. Already classified. And officially, shut down. Which meant fewer questions. And fewer witnesses. Or so they thought. Up to this point, Montauk is strange. But still theoretically possible. Radar experiments. Mind research. Black budgets. Uncomfortable, but familiar. This is where the story stops feeling like Cold War history. And starts feeling like something else entirely. Because nearly every Montauk witness, no matter when they came forward, describes the same object. The Montauk chair. Not a throne. Not a control seat. A crude metal chair bolted to the floor. Wires ran from its armrests. Cables from its headpiece. And thick conduits snaked from the chair into the walls, connecting it directly to the radar tower above. Metallic clank echoes. According to former technicians, the chair wasn't designed to restrain the body. It was designed to focus the mind. The subject would be seated. Electrodes attached. Monitors activated. And then, the frequencies would begin. Witnesses described sensations of intense pressure behind the eyes. A roaring sound inside the skull. Thoughts becoming louder, sharper, harder to control. One alleged test subject later said. It felt like my thoughts weren't mine anymore. Like the room was thinking with me. Dramatic pause. The theory, according to insiders, was that certain individuals had heightened psychic sensitivity. The chair amplified that sensitivity. And when it worked too well. Technicians claimed that when a subject visualized an object strongly enough, sometimes unintentionally, the electromagnetic field created by the radar system could project that thought into physical space. Not metaphorically. Physically. Tools appeared. Shapes formed. Shadows moved where nothing should have been. And then there was the experiment they say ended everything. A late-night test in 1973. Fatigue. Overconfidence. And a subject pushed far beyond safe limits. Security alarms suddenly triggered. Personnel reported a massive energy surge. And something, described only as large, animalistic, and unstable, manifested inside the chamber. One guard reportedly fled the room screaming. Another refused to return to the base. Sirens faintly wail, then cut out. Within days, the project was allegedly shut down. Equipment dismantled. Files classified. Subjects dismissed, or silenced. Officially, none of this ever happened. But here's the part investigators still can't explain. Why do so many witnesses, separated by years, locations, and credibility, describe the same chair? The same cables. The same sensations. And the same moment when something went terribly wrong. If the Montauk chair was where the experiments began, this is where they allegedly crossed a line they couldn't come back from. Because according to multiple insiders, Montauk wasn't just manipulating the mind anymore. It was manipulating time. The story goes like this. Once researchers realized the electromagnetic field could amplify thought, they asked a dangerous question. What happens if a subject doesn't imagine an object, but a moment? A place. A date. An event. Pause. Former technicians claimed that under specific conditions, the radar tower generated a focus distortion, something they described as a window. Not a metaphorical one. A literal opening in space-time. Witnesses described it as a shimmer in the air. Like heat rising off asphalt. Except colder. Heavier. And when the field stabilized, you could see through it. One alleged observer said. It wasn't like watching a movie. It felt like the room had a hole in it. Dramatic music swells slightly. According to these claims, test subjects were sent through. Some stepped forward willingly. Others were pushed. Where did they go? That's where the stories diverge. Some say the subjects were sent minutes into the future, returning shaken, disoriented, but alive. Others claimed people were sent decades ahead, and never came back. And then there are the most disturbing accounts. Several witnesses independently claimed Montauk experiments targeted a very specific year. 1943. Philadelphia. If that sounds familiar, it should. That's the same time and place linked to the legendary Philadelphia experiment, where a Navy destroyer was supposedly rendered invisible, and maybe something far worse. According to Montauk insiders, the base wasn't trying to know what happened in 1943. They were trying to reach it. Music cuts to silence for a beat. And this is where the phrase, "lost years," enters the story. Multiple individuals later claimed they were taken to Montauk as teenagers. But released years later with memories that didn't line up. Birthdays missing. Gaps in time. Aging that didn't match the calendar. One alleged survivor said. I remember being there for weeks. But when I came back, 5 years were gone. Doctors called it trauma. Psychologists called it false memory. But investigators noticed something unsettling. Different people. Same missing years. Same descriptions of the portal room. Same cold sensation before everything went dark. Low hum returns. And if even one of those stories is true, it means Montauk didn't just experiment on time. It broke it. Every story like this has the same turning point. The moment where things go too far. At Montauk, witnesses say that moment came fast, and ended everything just as suddenly. After the final experiment. After the alarms. After whatever it was that appeared inside that room. Orders came down from somewhere above the base. No explanations. No discussions. Just one command. Shut it down. Heavy metal door slams shut. According to former personnel, the shutdown wasn't gradual. It was surgical. Equipment dismantled within days. Sensitive rooms sealed with concrete. Entire tunnel systems collapsed instead of preserved. And the people? Some were reassigned. Some were discharged. And some, according to insiders, were told to never speak about Montauk again. One former security guard later claimed. They didn't threaten us. They didn't have to. They just acted like it never happened. Soft, unsettling music begins. Officially, the Air Force stated Montauk Air Force Station was fully decommissioned in 1981. No experiments. No classified research beyond radar testing. Case closed. Except, it wasn't. Because investigators who later accessed the site noticed something strange. Certain buildings were emptied, not abandoned. Walls stripped. Mounting brackets left behind, where machines once stood. Why remove everything? If there was nothing to hide? Even more curious, many records related to Montauk remain classified or heavily redacted decades later. Not nuclear weapons. Not spy satellites. Radar research. Beat. Or so they say. And then there's the silence from officials who were there. When contacted years later, some refused interviews outright. Others responded with the same phrase. I don't remember that. Which is an odd thing to say. About a place you worked for years. Today, Camp Hero is a public park. Kids run through fields once fenced with warning signs. tourists photograph bunkers meant to survive bombardment. But Building 610? Still sealed. Still looming. And still avoided by those who know its history. Because whether Montauk was a failed experiment, or something far more dangerous, the shutdown suggests one thing very clearly. Whatever they were doing out there, they didn't want it finished. And they didn't want it remembered.